Vietnam is the last market of a four-market commission, and it arrives with the odds against it. The pool atlas ranked the playable belt: Thailand first, Indonesia second, Vietnam third. Then the audits ran. Thailand earned this series' second unconditional yes. Indonesia came back a refusal. The banks already reached 3 programs. The anchor was repricing under a sovereign rescue, and a free QR tier was undercutting the pool. Malaysia came back a refusal too, capped by statute at 0.60% before its rewards culture ever formed. So by the time I reached Vietnam, I had learned to distrust the very thing that made Thailand a yes. Twice in this commission, I imported the Thai finding. That bank points ladder into one airline and stop, into a market's research. And twice, I had to correct it. Indonesia and Malaysia both have multi-program breadth from mainstream cards. Thailand looked like the exception, not the template. So when an English-language search for Vietnamese bank transfer partners came back thin, I did not treat it as a finding. A search gap is not a market gap. I ran it again in Vietnamese. And the answer changed the ranking. Roughly 20 Vietnamese issuers convert card points into Lotus miles, and essentially nothing else. Techcombank, Vietcombank, VP Bank, Vietin Bank, VIBA CBB IDV Sacombank, TP Bank, and the foreign banks too, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Shinhan, Sumitomo Mitsui. One destination. The only exception is Citibank Vietnam, which feeds Crease Flyer, and that is an international issuer exporting a global product, not a Vietnamese bank building breadth for Vietnamese customers. That is the Thailand finding, intensified, running through more of the banking system than Thailand's did. And it sits on top of the richest pool of the 4. Credit merchant discount at an estimated 2 to 3%. No cap found, and eroding not against a free QR rail, but against NAPAS, a domestic card scheme at 0.5 to 1%. That distinction matters more than it sounds, and I will spend a chapter on it. A zero-fee rail has no floor. A cheaper card scheme does. The anchor is already signed, and unlike Indonesia's, it is improving. Through 2026, Lotus Miles simplified tier accrual, loosened status qualification, added benefits, described its upgrade chart change as an enhancement, and went shopping for foreign feeder currencies. This is an independent analysis of whether HeyMax, the Singapore rewards platform this series has examined across 17 volumes, should enter Vietnam. Researched in August 2026 from public sources. Nobody paid for it, nobody previewed it, and nothing in it is financial advice. The verdict is yes. The third unconditional yes in 16 volumes after Singapore's founding story and Thailand. And this volume has to do something the others did not. It has to revise the Atlas's own ordering because 2 of its 3 belt calls did not survive the audits. 2 honest holes belong here in the introduction, rather than buried at the end. The bottleneck evidence rests on Vietnam Airlines' published partner list, cross-read against Vietnamese language sources, not on reading 20 issuers' rewards pages in Vietnamese. And the uncapped pool rests on the absence of a state bank sealing in the frameworks I could reach, not on a document confirming that none exists. Those are the 2 facts carrying the verdict, and they are the 2 I could least completely verify from outside the country. Both go in the falsifiers. Both are about a week of local desk research away from being closed. 12 chapters, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Corridor and a Country That Already Flies. Vietnam's demand chapter has a shape none of the previous 3 had, and getting the shape right matters more than the numbers do. The corridor first, because that is what pays HeyMax today. Singapore to Ho Chi Minh City is served by 4 airlines with a combined 84 weekly nonstop flights in each direction on July 2026 schedules. That makes it one of the busiest regional sectors out of Changi. Hanoi adds to it. So that is a dense, competitive, multi-carrier corridor into HeyMax's home market. And every hotel, every activity, Every transfer booked along it already monetizes through the travel floor, at the vertical's invariant 10 to 25%. It is thinner than Malaysia's. Kuala Lumpur to Singapore is fourth busiest on Earth at 447,000 seats, and it has no land border. But unlike Malaysia's, it is growing rather than contracting. Vietnam Airlines is expanding hard for summer 2026, adding London Heathrow services and regional routes. Vietjet is growing its regional fleet. Now the fact that reframes the market, and it is the one I did not expect. Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City is the second busiest domestic air route in the world. In January 2026 alone, it carried 1,100,000 scheduled seats, ahead of the major domestic routes of Japan, India, and Saudi Arabia. I want to be careful about what that does and does not mean, because it is exactly the kind of number that invites bad analysis. What it does not mean is revenue. Domestic Vietnamese flying generates no corridor commission for Haymax, and domestic redemptions are worth little in miles because domestic fares are cheap, the same asymmetry the Indonesia volume found across the archipelago. What it does mean is this: Vietnam is an air-habituated country. More than 1 million domestic seats a month, in a market whose credit card penetration is still described as historically low, tells you something specific. The flying habit arrived before the card habit did. That ordering is unusual, and it is favorable. In most markets this series has examined, the affluent consumer learns to spend on a card and then discovers travel. In Vietnam, a very large population already flies routinely and is only now formalizing into cards. A miles product sells to people who fly. Vietnam has those people. What it has not yet had is a way for them to earn. Now the outbound and premium demand, which is what miles actually redeem into. Vietnamese outbound runs to Singapore, Japan, and Korea, and the premium end is demonstrably price inelastic. Business class fares on the 3 busiest routes out of Ho Chi Minh City, Singapore, Tokyo, London, ran 180 to 240% above off-peak over the Christmas and New Year period on fourth quarter 2025 pricing. Read that carefully because it is a better signal than it first appears. Fares spiking that hard at peak means demand that will not reschedule. People flying home, people flying for occasions. Those are precisely the trips an award seat serves best, and precisely the moments when a member discovers what a mile is actually worth. Now the addressable tier, sized honestly. Vietnam's credit cards concentrate in a smaller, urban, affluent segment used for premium retail, travel, and cross-border shopping. The TP Bank Vietnam Airlines Visa Platinum's tier upgrade threshold, 1.5 billion dong of trailing 12-month spend, hints at how narrow the very top of that is. So the realistic optimizer cohort is small in absolute terms, comparable to Thailand's beachhead rather than exceeding it, drawn from a country of roughly 100 million people. But it is the fastest forming of the 4. Thailand's affluent card tier is mature, and its runway is being consumed. Indonesia's never formed at all. Malaysia's is capped. Vietnam's is early, growing, and buying travel benefit cards specifically. The demand verdict: a growing multi-carrier corridor to home, a country that already flies at extraordinary volume, premium demand that does not flinch at peak pricing, and an affluent tier that is small today and forming faster than anywhere else on the belt. That is compounding spread demand, the Atlas's argument in its strongest available form. The pool underneath it comes next. Chapter 2, the richest pool on the belt and the gentlest clock. Every volume in this series has an interchange chapter, because interchange is where rewards money comes from. Vietnam's is the shortest good news chapter I have written. The card pool. Credit card merchant discount rates in Vietnam run an estimated 2 to 3%, depending on card type, merchant category, and acquirer. Debit runs 0.5 to 1.5. These are commercial estimates, labeled as such because Vietnam publishes no regulatory schedule. which is itself the point. Compare across the commission. Thailand, an estimated 1.6 to 2.5% uncapped. Indonesia, 1.5 to 3% uncapped but undercut by a free QR tier. Malaysia, capped by statute at 0.60%. Vietnam's credit band is the richest of the four. On the interchange questions specifically, I could find no cap. The State Bank of Vietnam regulates payments under Decree 101 of 2012 and Circular 09 of 2020, and nothing in those frameworks surfaced as a ceiling comparable to Bank Negara's or the Reserve Bank of Australia's. I want to be careful here rather than triumphant. Absence of evidence in a search is not a regulatory finding. This volume treats Vietnam as uncapped and flags primary source confirmation from the State Bank as an open item and a falsifier. It is the one load-bearing number I could not nail to a document. Now the clock, and this is where Vietnam separates itself from its neighbors. Every market on this belt has a technology clock, some cheaper rail eroding the card pool from below. What matters is what that rail actually is, because the three cases are not the same. Thailand's is Prompt Pay, a national instant payment scheme, free at the point of use, mid-conquest, with an estimated 5-year runway left in the affluent card tier. Indonesia's is QRIS, and it is the harshest on the map. Bank Indonesia mandated acceptance, priced it at 0.3%, and then waived the merchant fee entirely below 500,000 rupiah, roughly $30, which covers most Indonesian retail by transaction count. The regulator did not cap the card pool. It made the alternative free. Vietnam's is NAPAS, and NAPAS is a domestic card scheme, not a free rail. Its cards carry a merchant discount rate of 0.5 to 1%. That distinction decides the runway, so let me be explicit about why. A zero-fee rail has no floor. As it spreads, it removes merchant-funded money from the economy entirely, and nothing a rewards platform does can put it back. A cheaper card scheme has a floor. NAPA's at 0.5 to 1% is thinner than international scheme credit at 2 to 3, but it is not nothing. And more importantly, it competes on the same axis: acceptance, credit, consumer protection, where premium international cards have real advantages for exactly the affluent, traveling, cross-border spending tier a miles product addresses. The State Bank's stated ambition reinforces that red. Its target is 80% cashless by 2030, a cashless target, not a card suppression policy. Vietnam's regulator wants people off banknotes. Indonesia's built a free rail and made cards the expensive option. Those are different projects, with different consequences for anyone funding rewards. So the pool atlases call that Vietnam holds the longest-dated pool on the belt survives contact with this chapter. And the mechanism is now specific rather than assumed. Not that Vietnam is behind on digital payments, but that its cheap rail is a card scheme rather than a zero-fee one. Now the demand-side counterweight, because the pool being rich does not mean it is large. Vietnam's card story is a small, affluent story. Credit cards are concentrated in a smaller, urban, affluent segment used for premium retail, travel, and cross-border shopping. Card penetration has historically been low and is improving steadily. The third quarter of 2024 counted 110 million domestic bank cards and 47 million international bank cards. But those are cards, not cardholders. Vietnamese consumers hold multiples, so nothing about penetration should be read from them. What can be read is the direction. The growing young affluent cohort is explicitly buying travel benefit cards to fund premium experiences. That is aspiration pointed directly at the shelf, forming now. The pool priced, the richest credit band of the four markets in this commission. No cap found, eroding against a cheap card scheme rather than a free rail, and attached to a small but fast-forming affluent tier. That is the best pool chapter in the commission. The anchor chapter is better. Chapter 3, 20 Banks, 1 Program. This is the chapter the volume turns on, and I want to describe how it was found because the method matters as much as the result. 3 markets into this commission, I had learned to distrust the Thailand finding. Thailand's discovery, that Thai bank points ladder into Royal Orchid Plus and essentially nothing else, grounded this series' second unconditional yes. Then Indonesia's banks turned out to reach Crease Flyer, Asia Miles and Garuda Miles. Then Malaysia's Enriched turned out to take conversions from around 14 issuers, with Maybank alone reaching 3 programs. Twice I had imported the Thai framing into a market's research, and twice I had to correct it. So when an English-language search for Vietnamese bank transfer partners came back thin, I did not treat that as a finding. A search gap is not a market gap, and this series has been burned by exactly that inference before. I ran it again in Vietnamese. The answer, Vietnamese bank points converge on 1 program. The named bank partners whose card points convert into Lotus Miles, Bong Sen Vang, run to Techcombank, Vietcombank, VP Bank, Viettin Bank, VIB, Standard Chartered, Sumitomo Mitsui, ACB, BIDV, Citibank, Eximbank, HSBC, MB Bank, Hana, PVcombank, Shinhan, SCB, SHB, TP Bank, and Sacombank. That is roughly 20 issuers, 1 destination. The only non-Lotus Miles path I could surface is Citibank Vietnam, which converts CD dollars, CD miles, Premier Miles, and CD reward points into Crease Flyer. And Citibank is an international issuer exporting a global product into Vietnam. Not a Vietnamese bank building breadth for Vietnamese customers. Now set that against the 3 markets before it. Thailand, bank ladders reach Royal Orchid Plus and essentially nothing else. That was the vacancy, and it earned a yes. Indonesia, BCA, Mandiri, and UOB reach Crease Flyer, Asia Miles, and Garuda Miles. The vacancy shrinks to a convenience argument. Malaysia, 14 issuers into Enrich and Maybank into 3 programs, same shrinkage. Vietnam, 20 issuers, 1 program. This is the Thailand finding, intensified, not merely present, stronger. Thailand's single program bottleneck ran through a handful of major issuers. Vietnam's runs through practically the entire banking system, foreign banks included. HSBC, Standard Chartered, Shinhan, and Sumitomo Mitsui all feed Lotus Miles from their Vietnamese operations, and none of them feeds anything else from there. So let me run the ownership test properly, because the whole verdict depends on it. If the transferable currency seat in Vietnam is vacant, who could naturally fill it? Not the banks. 20 of them have had the opportunity, and everyone has chosen the same single destination. That tells you the economics of building breadth from an issuer's position do not work in Hanoi any better than they did in Bangkok. Not Vietnam Airlines. An aggregator that reaches 20 other airlines is a threat to Lotus Miles, not an extension of it. Not the wallets, whose points are discount instruments. And not a local startup, which would need a rack of airline treaties before it had a single member to justify the rates, the same wall the Thailand volumes gap hunt described. The natural owner is a platform that already holds the treaties, and there is exactly one in the region that does. Now the caveat I owe this chapter. Because a finding, this convenient deserves skepticism rather than a victory lap. I have not read every Vietnamese issuer's rewards page in Vietnamese. My evidence is Vietnam Airlines' own published partner list, cross-read against Vietnamese language bank and comparison sources. It is possible that one of the 20 quietly offers a second program that neither source surfaced. That would not overturn the finding. One issuer with a second path is what Indonesia and Malaysia have several of, and the shape would still be far closer to Thailand's than to theirs. But it would soften the word, essentially, and I would rather flag it now than be corrected later. What is not in doubt is the direction. In Indonesia and Malaysia, multi-program access is the ordinary condition of a mainstream cardholder. In Vietnam, it is not. 20 banks, 1 program. The gap hunt has something real to work with. Chapter 4. Lotus Miles signed and investing in itself. 3 anchor chapters into this commission, a pattern has emerged that no single volume could have shown, and Vietnam sits at the good end of it. Thailand's anchor was Royal Orchid Plus, restructured, revenue-hungry, shipping Smart Miles Pay, and critically, not yet signed. The entire Thai plan gated on winning that treaty. Indonesia's anchor was Garuda Miles, already signed, and repricing 4 times in 12 months, including a temporary chart that raised some domestic awards by 500 to 1,100%, while a sovereign fund recapitalized the parent to the tune of roughly $1.33 billion. Vietnam's anchor is Lotus Miles, already signed and moving the opposite way from Garuda. Here is what Lotus Miles did in 2026 from Vietnam Airlines' own communications. It simplified tier accrual, cutting accrual zones from 8 to 5, moving multipliers to clean half-point increments, and increasing tier segment accrual on certain domestic fare families. From the 1st of July, it let members renew or upgrade to Platinum, Gold, or Titanium by meeting either tier miles or tier segments. A loosening of qualification, not a tightening. From the 15th of May, it extended check-in privileges to 3 accompanying guests for Million Milers and Platinum members. And it describes its upgrade award chart change as an enhancement. I looked for a devaluation and did not find one. The honest caveat, I did not read the 2 redemption table documents line by line, so no devaluation found is not the same as no devaluation. But the direction of every change I could verify is toward the member, not away from them. Now the signal this series actually cares about is the program selling. 3 pieces of evidence say yes. First, cash and miles. Pay a fare with cash plus miles, minimum 2,500 miles per passenger per flight. That is the same liability monetization product this series read as sell mode in Royal Orchid Plus's Smart Miles Pay. A program that lets you spend miles at the margin is a program managing a liability it would rather convert. Second, non-airline earn partners already in place. Booking.com, Caligo, Mobiphone, MIC Insurance. Lotus Miles already buys miles from non-airline counterparties, so the commercial machinery for a Haymax-style treaty is not hypothetical there. It is running. Third, it is actively recruiting foreign feeders. Axis Bank added Lotus Miles to its TravelEdge transfer roster effective the 2nd of April 2026, alongside British Airways and Finnair. Magnify's Mag Miles transfers in as well. A program courting Indian and international feeder currencies is a program that wants volume from outside its own market. Membership is free, open to any nationality, with no minimum flight requirement. So what does this mean for the entry, stated precisely? Thailand's plan had a gate. No Royal Orchid Treaty, no launch, and that volume made the negotiation the decision point. Vietnam has no such gate because Lotus Miles is on the shelf already. But Indonesia proved that a signed treaty is only worth what it delivers. And what Garuda's delivers is a 1-to-1 into a currency that repriced 4 times in a year. So the right question is not is it signed. The right question is whether what it points at is appreciating or depreciating. Garuda's is depreciating. Lotus Miles, on every verifiable change in 2026, is improving. Now the caveats, because an anchor chapter without them is advocacy. Vietnam Airlines is state-influenced. This series learned from Dan and Tara that a counterparty's owner can matter more than the counterparty itself. Vietnam's state involvement has not produced Indonesia's pattern. No emergency recapitalization, no published profitability deadline forcing liability monetization. But the structural exposure exists, and rate protection clauses belong in any deal, exactly as the Atom lesson requires. Domestic Vietnamese redemptions are cheap in cash terms, so the aspirational redemption has to be international. That puts weight on the non-Lotus Miles shelf, the Japanese, Taiwanese, Hong Kong, and Singapore currencies, which Haymax holds and Vietnamese banks do not reach. And Vietjet, the large low-cost competitor, runs its own program outside this analysis. The anchor profiled, signed, enhancing, monetizing at the margin, and shopping for foreign feeders. Of the 4 anchors in this commission, it is the only one where the treaty is both already held and pointed at something that is getting better. Chapter 5, Cake and the cleanest bank-first candidate since Hong Kong. The ecosystem-first rule has now paid for itself 3 times in this commission. So let me restate it before applying it, because Vietnam is the market where it finally returns a yes. A payments business or digital bank is a partnership candidate when it is a bank first and an ecosystem second. And it is a no-deficit giant when the order is reversed. Hong Kong's virtual banks were banks first. Licensed challengers with capital and no distribution, which is exactly why U-shaped and miles-shaped deals became available there. Indonesia's leaders were ecosystems first. See Bank rides Shopee. Bank Jago sits in GoTo. Allo Channel's CT Corp declined all 3 without a meeting. Malaysia's GX Bank is Grab and Singtel owned, declined on the same reasoning. The wallets first, and the rule disposes of most of them quickly. Vietnam's mobile payments market is worth roughly $40.5 billion in 2026. The top 5 wallets, Momo, ZaloPay, ViettelPay, ShopeePay, and VNPay, held about 65% of the market between them in 2025. I am deliberately not quoting individual wallet shares. The sources conflict badly across years. One puts Momo at 68%, another has ZaloPay at 53% on 2023 data. A number that unstable does not belong in an analysis other people might act on. The combined top 5 figure is consistent, so that is the one I use. Run the rule. ShopeePay is Shopee's arm, ecosystem first, declined, same as Cbank. ViettelPay belongs to the state telco, ecosystem first, and a telco besides. ZaloPay sits inside VNG's Zalo ecosystem and probably fails the rule too. Momo, an independent fintech, and VNPay, which is bank infrastructure first, are the 2 worth testing. Now Cake, which is the find. Cake is Vietnam's AI first, digital-only bank. Euromoney named it Vietnam's best digital bank in its 2026 awards for excellence. It is the first digital-only bank in Vietnam to reach profitability after 3.5 years of operation. Its average revenue per user was $25 in 2025, and it is targeting $44 in 2026. Run the 5 questions. Deficit, real and precisely the Hong Kong configuration. A card product. Access to Chapter 2's uncapped pool. A customer acquisition cost. An explicit public ambition to raise revenue per user and no aspirational currency of its own to raise it with. Funding, it is profitable. That matters more than it sounds. Most digital banks this series has assessed could not pay for a partnership even where they wanted one. Cake can. Governance, bank first, not an ecosystem arm. That is the whole point. One diligence item, some sources describe a VP Bank affiliation, and VP Bank is itself one of the 20 issuers feeding Lotus Miles. So confirm the ownership before grading it finally, because a parent that already runs a competing transfer path changes the conversation, as the Indonesia volume found with BCA. Demographics, digital first, urban, young affluent. The exact cohort Chapter 1 identified as fastest forming. Replication, yes, and Timo and TNEX sit behind it as smaller versions of the same shape. That is 4 clear and 1 to verify. Grade, a minus. And on the evidence, it is the cleanest bank-first counterparty this series has identified since Hong Kong's virtual banks, the ones that produce the deals the whole partnership grammar was written to find. The contrast with Malaysia is worth stating, because the 2 volumes were written days apart. Malaysia's best partnership target is Touch and Go. 22 million users, extraordinary reach, and an Ant Group co-ownership flag, sitting inside a market capped at 0.60%, where a partnership is worth less to both sides because the surrounding economics are thin. Vietnam's best is cake, smaller reach, but bank first, profitable, hunting for exactly the engagement a miles currency provides, and sitting in the richest uncapped pool on the belt. Reach is not the only variable. A smaller partner in a funded market can be worth more than a larger partner in a suppressed one. The rest of the field briefly. TMO, Vietnam's first digital bank, launched with VP Bank in 2015, relaunched with Viet Capital Bank in September 2020, and TNEX are real, smaller, and hold the same configuration. They are the tail. And unlike Indonesia's tail, they sit in a pool that can pay. So Vietnam's lattice reads: 1 A- candidate with an ownership check, 2 independent wallets worth testing, a repeatable tail, and a clean set of declines. That is a better queue than Indonesia's and a differently shaped one from Malaysia's, smaller at the top, much healthier underneath. Chapter 6: The Record and the Community That Does Not Exist. 2 audit layers share this chapter, and the second one is a condition this series has not encountered before. The record first, and it is the shortest in the commission. Haymax's Series A communication of January 2026 names 2 operating markets, Singapore and Hong Kong, and Japan, Taiwan, and Australia for expansion. Vietnam is not mentioned. Neither in that document are Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, or the Philippines, though an earlier report has the chief executive naming 4 Southeast Asian launch targets. Vietnam is not among the 4 he named. So Vietnam's record is the emptiest of this commission, never claimed as a market, and never even named as an ambition in the reporting I could find. What Haymax does hold is the thing that matters most, the Lattice Miles Treaty. Chapter 4 covered what it is pointed at. Alongside it sits the travel floor's Vietnamese inventory, monetizing an 84 flights a week corridor today, and the destination earned thread for members physically in Vietnam. An anchor already signed, in a market never entered, with no announced intention to enter it. That is an unusual asset position, and it is the one the plan builds on. Now the community, and here I have to report an absence rather than a finding. I searched in Vietnamese for a point send miles community, the equivalent of Singapore's Mile Lion, or Indonesia's Pinter Point, or Malaysia's Refine Points and Boleh Miles. What came back was Vietnam Airlines' own pages, Vietnam Airlines newsroom, bank promotional pages like BIDV's Visa campaign, online travel agency FAQ content, and a general technology site explaining how to accrue Bong Sen Vang miles. No independent points publication surfaced. I want to be honest about the strength of that evidence. It is one search pass. Vietnamese miles discussion may well live in Facebook groups or on Zalo, where a web search will not reach it. So the correct statement is not that Vietnam has no points community. It is that I could not find one, and that the public-facing discourse about miles in Vietnam is currently owned by the airline and the banks. If that holds, it is a genuinely new condition for this series, and it is worth setting against the other 3. Thailand, a pre-professional community, referral economics arriving but not yet dominant. That volume identified an open earn-standing window and made it a central go-to-market asset. Indonesia, professionalized and disillusioned. Pinter Point publishes valuations, says Garuda Miles has devalued, and tells readers to get American credit cards. That window has closed. Malaysia, competent, analytical, unangry, past the window without the bitterness. Vietnam, possibly no independent layer at all. What that does to an entry cuts both ways, and the 2 halves are not equal. The favorable half, no referral economics to pay into, no incumbent commentators with existing loyalties, no devaluation grievances to inherit. An entrant would not be joining a conversation. It would be starting one, and whoever starts a conversation sets its terms. The unfavorable half, and I think it is the larger one, no free audit layer. The Thailand and Singapore playbooks both depend on a community that verifies your claims and then defends them publicly when a devaluation lands. Vietnam offers no such verification service. Every claim about rates, ratios, and transfer times would have to be established by the platform itself, to an audience with no local reference points for judging whether a mile is well priced. That is an education cost, not a marketing cost, and it is slower to pay off. It also means the first serious Vietnamese points commentator, whoever that turns out to be, arrives into a landscape an incumbent has already framed. Being early is worth more there than anywhere else in the commission. The record and the community together, an empty record, a signed anchor, and a market where nobody is yet explaining to Vietnamese travelers what their miles are worth. The gap hunt takes it from here, and it has more to work with than any market since Thailand. Chapter 7: The Gap Hunt and the Third Entrant-Shaped Vacancy. The ownership test. Is the vacancy real? And if it is real and valuable, why has nobody filled it? Across 16 volumes, this test has returned an entrant-shaped answer exactly twice: Singapore's founding story and Thailand. Everywhere else the answer was, somebody has, somebody will, or nobody can afford to. Candidate 1, the transferable currency seat. Chapter 3 established the fact. Roughly 20 Vietnamese issuers, domestic and foreign, from Vietcombank and Techcombank to HSBC, Standard Chartered, Shinhan and Sumitomo Mitsui, convert card points into Lotus miles. Practically none convert into anything else. The lone exception is Citibank Vietnam Feeding Crease Flyer, an international issuer's global product rather than Vietnamese breadth. Is it real? Emphatically. A Vietnamese optimizer has one destination for every point they earn in a country whose aspiration map, Singapore, Tokyo, Seoul, points at programs their banks do not reach. Now the ownership test run properly. The banks will not fill it. 20 of them have had the opportunity, and everyone chose the same single destination. That is not oversight. It is the same economics Bangkok showed, where an issuer's return on negotiating 20 airline treaties does not justify the decade it would take. Vietnam Airlines will not. An aggregator reaching 20 competitors is a threat to Lotus miles, not an extension of it. The wallets will not. Chapter 5 showed most of them fail the ecosystem first test, and none of them holds an airline treaty. And a local startup cannot. It would need the treaty rack before it had a single member to justify the rates. So the natural owner is whoever already holds the treaties. That is the Thailand answer, arrived at independently, in a market where the bottleneck runs through more of the banking system than Thailand's did. This is the third entrant-shaped vacancy in 16 volumes. Candidate 2, Portal Earn. Vietnamese rewards are earned on card rails at rates issuers set. Nobody pays Vietnamese members miles for shopping through a portal on top of the card they already hold. Unfilled, uncontested. The same vacancy Indonesia and Malaysia had here sitting on the richest credit pool of the four. Natural owner, a consumer platform with treaties, same answer again. Candidate 3, the digital bank currency. Chapter 5's finding. Cake is profitable, bank first, publicly hunting for revenue per user, and has no aspirational currency. That is not a vacancy in the market so much as a deficit in a counterparty, which makes it a partnership rather than a product and puts it in the ledger rather than here. Candidate 4, the education layer. Chapter 6 found no independent Vietnamese points publication. Nobody is telling Vietnamese travelers what a mile is worth. This one is unusual because it is a vacancy an entrant fills by operating, not by building. Whoever arrives first and publishes honest arithmetic becomes the reference point. It is not a revenue line, it is a moat, and this series has watched exactly that moat work in Singapore. The Hunt's verdict. One entrant-shaped currency vacancy, stronger than Thailand's on the bottleneck evidence. One unfilled Portal Earn vacancy on the best pool of the four. One high-grade partnership deficit, and an uncontested education layer. Now the discipline. Because a result this clean deserves a hard look rather than a celebration. What could make this wrong? Two things, and both are already flagged. The bottleneck evidence rests on Vietnam Airlines' published partner list, cross-read against Vietnamese language sources, not on reading 20 issuers' own rewards pages. If several of them quietly offer a second program, Vietnam slides toward the Indonesia shape. And the pool's uncapped status rests on the absence of a state bank sealing in the frameworks I could reach, not on a document confirming there is none. Neither uncertainty is resolvable from a desk the way the others were. Both go to the falsifiers rather than being smoothed over here. But on the evidence available, Vietnam's gap hunt is the strongest result in this commission and possibly in the series. The arithmetic has to confirm it can be funded. Chapter 8, Entry Economics. The arithmetic chapter, and the one that decides whether Chapter 7's result survives contact with money. The funding side, can Vietnamese commissions mint competitive miles? Travel runs at the invariant 10 to 25%, and Chapter 1, Establish the Corridor, already carries Haymax members on 84 weekly flights each way from Singapore alone. E-commerce runs the Shopee and TikTok shop economics, the Indonesia volume priced as the richest on the map, with Lazada present too. And the bounty economy runs on Chapter 2's uncapped 2 to 3% credit pool, the richest of the 4 markets in this commission. Blend those with the method the Japan volume established, and the funding clears at the 1 mile per dollar class on travel-led mixes, with more headroom than Thailand's and considerably more than Malaysia's. The pool is not the constraint here. It is the least constrained pool of the 4. Now the competitive rate war, and this is where Vietnam differs most from Indonesia. Indonesia's incumbent rate was genuinely rich. A BC, a Singapore Airlines co-brand, earns 1 crease flyer mile per 10,000 rupiah, roughly 1.8 miles per dollar, which beats Haymax's roughly 1 mile per dollar head-to-head. That volume said so outright and rested its case on stacking. Vietnam's published incumbent data point is different in kind. UOB's PRVI miles promotion ran 9 reward miles per 100,000 dong of foreign currency spend between June and September 2026. I am deliberately not converting that into a per dollar rate. It is a promotional rate on foreign currency spend on one card. Turning a promo into a market benchmark is exactly the sort of arithmetic this series refuses to do. So the honest position is, I do not have a reliable Vietnamese market earn rate. Any entry would need to establish one before pricing against it. What I can say with confidence is structural, and it does not depend on a rate. Every one of those 20 issuers pays in points that go to one place. Haymax's proposition is, earn on portal, spend on top of whatever your card already pays, transfer 1-to-1 with no ratio table, and reach more than 20 programs instead of 1. In Indonesia and Malaysia, that third clause was a convenience argument. In Vietnam, it is a possibility argument, the same thing Thailand's was, which is what made Thailand's a yes. The costs. Addressed Vietnamese launch needs Vietnamese language throughout, dong display, local support, the +84 gate, floor assembly through the marketplace and travel affiliate networks, and a regulatory perimeter that is real. Vietnam maintains meaningful requirements around payments, data localization, and foreign platforms. This is not a market where a foreign consumer fintech operates casually. Set against the Commission's other 3, Thailand $3 to $500,000, Indonesia $5 to $800,000, Malaysia $2 to $350,000. Vietnam has a harder language and localization problem than Malaysia, a comparable one to Thailand, and a regulatory perimeter somewhere between Thailand's and Indonesia's. My estimate, $400,000 to $650,000 US for a credible first year, above Thailand, below Indonesia. Labeled an estimate, calibrated against the other 3 rather than measured. And note what is not in that number, an anchor negotiation. Thailand's 3 to 500,000 sat on top of a treaty that still had to be won, and that volume gated the whole entry on it. Lotus Miles is already signed. Vietnam's cost is higher, and its risk is lower. The revenue geometry. The corridor already runs and would deepen. The domestic side is the beachhead. Chapter 1 sized the optimizer cohort as small in absolute terms, comparable to Thailand's, from a country of roughly 100 million and fastest forming of the four. Against a $400,000 to $650,000 cost base, that beachhead clears at modest penetration. And the corridor's existing margin carries part of the build. The corridor pays for wedge structure the Japan plan described. Now the stress tests honestly. The dong is managed and comparatively stable, so Vietnam does not carry Indonesia's currency drift problem. Price the earn in local funding terms regardless. The anchor is state-influenced. Dan and Tara taught this series that a counterparty's owner can matter more than the counterparty, and rate protection clauses belong in the Lotus Miles arrangement whether or not anything looks wrong today. The NAPAS clock is the gentlest on the belt. Per Chapter 2, a cheap card scheme with a floor, rather than a free rail without one. And the education cost from Chapter 6 is real and belongs in the model. With no independent community to verify claims, member acquisition leans harder on the platform's own content than it did in Singapore or Thailand. I have not costed that separately, and it is the softest part of this estimate. The economics, stated once. Funding clears with the most headroom in the commission. The rate comparison is unestablished but structurally favorable because the competing proposition is one program rather than three. The cost is mid-range and carries no anchor negotiation risk, and the beachhead is small, early, and compounding. Vietnam's arithmetic lands green, with one honest hole where a market earn rate should be. Chapter 9, the plan, the ledger, and the battlefield. Three things share this chapter because Vietnam's are unusually short. There is no anchor to win, so the plan has fewer gates than Thailand's. The ledger has one strong name, and the threat register is quiet. The plan phased. Phase 0, month 0 to 6, cost approximately nothing. Deepen the corridor. Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi merchandised properly for members already flying 84 weekly services from Singapore alone. Destination earned switched on for members physically in Vietnam. And then the Vietnam-specific move. Start publishing in Vietnamese. Chapter 6 found no independent points publication. Chapter 7 called that an education vacancy an entrant fills by operating. Honest arithmetic about what a Lotus Miles mile is worth, published in Vietnamese, costs a content budget and begins compounding immediately. Nobody else is doing it. The gate at month 6 is not a treaty because the treaty exists. It is measurement. Does Vietnamese commission data hold at the top of the regional band? And does the corridor line grow on curation alone? Those are the two numbers Chapter 8 could not source. Phase 1, month 6 to 18, $400,000 to $650,000. The dressed entry, Vietnamese throughout, dong display, local support, the plus 84 gate, and the regulatory perimeter properly addressed rather than skirted. The proposition leads with breadth, and that is the inversion from Indonesia and Malaysia. There, breadth was a convenience argument because the banks already offered some. Here it is a possibility argument. You have 20 banks and one airline. We have 20 airlines. No previous volume in this commission could open that way except Thailand's. Phase 2, year 2 onward. The lattice. Cake first per Chapter 5, then Momo and VNPay if they survive the ecosystem first test, then the TMO and TNEX tail. Now the ledger. Lotus Miles, already signed. Chapter 4 covered the posture, enhancing, monetizing at the margin, recruiting foreign feeders. The action item is not to win it, but to reread it. Confirm the rate protection clauses survive a state-influenced parent's change of plan. That is the Danantara lesson, applied preemptively rather than after the fact. Cake, grade A- with the VP bank ownership check outstanding. Bank first. Profitable. Publicly hunting revenue per user. No aspirational currency. The cleanest Hong Kong configuration counterparty since Hong Kong. Momo and VNPay. Worth testing. Momo is an independent fintech. VNPay is bank infrastructure first. Both need the ecosystem first test run properly before grading. Timo and TNEX. The repeatable tail, and unlike Indonesia's tail, sitting in a pool that can pay for a deal. Declined, Shopee Pay, which is Shopee's arm. Viatel Pay, the state telco. Zalo Pay, inside VNG's Zalo ecosystem. All ecosystem first. All declined on the rule that has now disposed of counterparties in 4 markets without a meeting. Now the battlefield priced. The incumbent response flank is the live one, and it runs the opposite way from Malaysia's. Malaysia's banks already had breadth, so there was nothing to widen. Vietnam's have none, which means widening is available to them. 20 issuers currently choose one destination. If 2 or 3 added Crease Flyer and Asia Miles, the possibility argument degrades into Indonesia's convenience argument. Probability moderate on a 3-year view. Severity high. This is the argument for speed, and it is the strongest one in the volume. The anchor flank is quiet today and structurally present. A state-influenced parent, no distress, no deadline. The super app flank is low. Vietnam's wallets are large but ecosystem-bound, and none holds an airline treaty. The American challenger flank, the one-way mirror threat from the United States volume, applies there as everywhere, and less urgently, because Vietnam is further down any Western entrance list than Thailand. And a Vietnam-specific one, the regulatory perimeter. Payments licensing, data localization, and foreign platform rules are real, and they can change. Not a threat to the thesis, but a live cost and a live risk. The shape of it, an anchor already held. A vacancy that is closing on a 3-year clock. A partnership queue with a genuine name at the top, and no fast-moving threat. The urgency here is not competitive pressure. It is that the thing making Vietnam attractive, 20 banks, 1 program, is exactly the thing any one of those 20 banks could end. Chapter 10. Vietnam against the series and a revision to the atlas. The comparison chapter, and it has to do something the previous 3 did not. It has to revise a verdict this series already published. The 4 markets of this commission, side by side. Thailand, pool uncapped at an estimated 1.6 to 2.5%. Breadth, 1 ladder, 1 airline. Anchor to be won and selling. Community pre-professional. Cost 3 to 500,000. Verdict, yes. Indonesia, pool uncapped but undercut by a free QR rail. Breadth, 3 programs. Anchor signed and repricing hard. Community disillusioned. Cost 5 to 800,000. Verdict, no on entry. Malaysia, pool capped at 0.60%. Breadth, 14 issuers, 3 programs. Anchor sound but already fed. Community competent. Cost 2 to 350,000. Verdict, no on entry. Vietnam, pool uncapped at 2 to 3%. Breadth, 20 issuers, 1 program. Anchor signed and enhancing. Community, none found. Cost 4 to 650,000. Verdict, yes. Now read the Vietnam row against the Thailand row. The awkward conclusion is unavoidable. Vietnam matches or beats Thailand on 4 of 6 axes. Its credit pool is richer. Its bottleneck is tighter, 20 issuers converging on 1 program against Thailand's handful. Its anchor is already signed and improving, where Thailand's had to be won from a program whose parent had been through court-supervised rehabilitation. And its clock is gentler, because NAPAS is a cheap card scheme with a floor, rather than a free rail without one. Thailand wins on 2. Its affluent tier is larger and more mature today, and its community is at the earned standing window, which is an asset Vietnam simply does not have. Vietnam has no community to earn standing with. Cost is a wash. Thailand's headline number is lower, but Thailand's plan gated on a treaty that did not exist, and the anchor risk sat on top of the cost. Vietnam's is higher, with the anchor already in hand. So the ranking has to change, and I would rather say it plainly than bury it. The Pool Atlas, Volume 15, screened every major interchange pool on Earth and named the playable belt as Thailand first, Indonesia second, Vietnam third. That ordering was made on pool, margin, and spread, before any of these 4 audits existed. 2 of its 3 calls have not survived the audits. Indonesia came back a refusal on findings the screen could not have seen: partial bank breadth, a repricing anchor, and a free QR tier undercutting the pool. And Vietnam now looks stronger than the screen allowed, because the screen measured the pool, and the thing that makes Vietnam attractive is not the pool. It is the bottleneck. The revised belt ordering. Vietnam and Thailand at the top, with Vietnam arguably first on a 3-year view. Indonesia and Malaysia declined on entry, with detachable assets in both. This series revised itself once before, when the Pool Atlas reclassified Australia closed after the Reserve Bank's cap. That revision came from a regulatory event. This one comes from doing the work. A screen is a filter, and 4 audits found things no filter could. Against the wider series, Vietnam joins Singapore and Thailand as the 3rd Entrant-Shaped Vacancy in 16 volumes. Against Japan, the series' first yes, and its biggest prize, Vietnam, is smaller today, cheaper, less contested, and earlier. Against the completed markets, it is not comparable. And against Canada, Indonesia, and Malaysia, it is the opposite case. They had detachable assets and no reason to enter. Vietnam has a reason to enter, and the asset already attached. Now the counterweight, because a chapter that revises the series in its own favor deserves the hardest look in the volume. 2 of Vietnam's advantages rest on evidence I could not fully close. The bottleneck rests on Vietnam Airline's own partner list, cross-read against Vietnamese language sources, not on reading 20 issuers' rewards pages. If several offer a quiet second program, Vietnam slides toward Indonesia. The uncapped pool rests on the absence of a state bank sealing in the frameworks I reached, not on a document confirming none exists. And one advantage is double-edged. The missing community is a moat and a cost at once, and I have not costed the education burden separately. That is the softest number in Chapter 8. None of that changes today's ranking. All of it goes in the falsifiers, which is where a revision this consequential belongs. Chapter 11, The Verdict and the Falsifiers. The verdict, yes, enter Vietnam and start the free half now. That is the 3rd unconditional yes in 16 volumes of market audits, after Singapore's founding story and Thailand. And unlike Thailand's, it does not gate on a negotiation, because the negotiation already happened. The working compressed. Roughly 20 Vietnamese issuers, domestic and foreign, convert card points into Lotus Miles, and essentially nothing else. That is the tightest single-program bottleneck this series has found. Tighter than Thailand's. And it means the entrance pitch is a possibility argument rather than a convenience one. The pool underneath it is the richest of this commission's 4. Credit merchant discount at an estimated 2 to 3%. No cap found. Eroding against NAPAS, a cheap card scheme with a floor, not a free rail without one. The longest dated pool on the belt, and now for a specific reason rather than an assumed one. The anchor is already on Haymax's shelf, and it spent 2026 simplifying tiers, loosening status qualification, adding benefits, enhancing its upgrade chart, and recruiting foreign feeders. Of the 4 anchors in this commission, it is the only one both already held and pointed at something improving. The corridor is dense and growing, 84 weekly nonstops each way from Singapore alone, in a country that already flies at extraordinary volume, whose premium demand runs 180 to 240% above off-peak at holidays. And nobody is explaining any of this to Vietnamese travelers, because no independent points publication exists that I could find. The shape of the yes. Phase 0 costs nothing and starts now. Deepen the corridor and begin publishing honest mile arithmetic in Vietnamese. Phase 1 is the $650,000 dressed entry, gated not on a treaty, but on measurement. Phase 2 is the lattice, led by Cake. Now the urgency, stated precisely. It is not competitive pressure. No fast-moving threat sits on this market. It is that the thing making Vietnam attractive is exactly the thing any one of 20 banks could end. A single major issuer adding Crease Flyer and Asia Miles converts the possibility argument into Indonesia's convenience argument. That is a product decision, not a strategic reversal, and it is available to them at any time. Now the falsifiers, ordered by likelihood, and 2 of them are honest holes rather than hypotheticals. 1, the bottleneck is softer than I found it. This is the largest uncertainty in the volume, and it is methodological. My evidence is Vietnam Airlines' published partner list, cross-read against Vietnamese language sources. I did not read 20 issuers' own rewards pages in Vietnamese. If several quietly offer a second program, Vietnam slides toward the Indonesia shape, and the verdict degrades from yes to conditional. Resolvable by a week of proper local desk research, and it should be done before any money moves. 2, the pool is capped and I missed it. The uncapped reading rests on the absence of a ceiling in the state bank frameworks I could reach, not on a document confirming none exists. If a cap surfaces, Vietnam's best structural advantage over Thailand evaporates and the market moves toward Malaysia's shape. Also, a desk research fix. 3, a major issuer widens. The Chapter 9 threat, restated as a falsifier because it is the one with a clock. Probability moderate on a 3-year view. Watch for any Vietnamese bank announcing a second airline partner. 4, the education cost is larger than modeled. Chapter 6 found no independent community. I treated that as a moat with a cost attached and did not cost it separately. If acquiring Vietnamese members without a verifying audit layer proves substantially more expensive than acquiring Thai ones did, the Phase 1 budget is wrong even if everything else holds. Measurable in Phase 0, from what the Vietnamese content actually converts. 5, the anchor's owner changes its mind. Vietnam Airlines is state-influenced. Nothing today resembles Garuda's position, no rescue, no deadline, no repricing. But Danantara taught this series that a counterparty's owner can matter more than the counterparty. Rate protection clauses, reread now rather than after. 5 falsifiers. 2 are desk research gaps that a competent local analyst closes in a week, and I would close them before spending anything. That is an unusual note to end a yes on. It is also the honest one. Vietnam is the strongest gap hunt result in this commission, and possibly in the series. And the 2 facts carrying it are the 2 I could least completely verify from outside the country. Go and check them, then go.